Time for our morning check-in with Mike Epple from 680 News with all that we need to know in business. Big talk about big deficits in Ottawa yesterday, Mike. How do we recover from something like this? $343 billion?
And that's just the latest estimate, Mark, likely to climb. Good morning. This was the actually larger than expected deficit forecast that Finance Minister Bill Morneau outlined, and it was a fiscal snapshot. It wasn't a full budget. They say they're going to do that likely later this year, and by then, you're going to have demands coming from the provinces and the cities. They're all looking for financial assistance as well. So the $343 billion deficit so far just accounts for programs like the CERB and the wage subsidy and the loss of tax revenue. So when you ask how long or, what's the timeline on recuperating from this, it's going to take years. The debt load is now going to be over $1 trillion for the first time ever. The only bright spot, and it's because the economy globally is so weak, is the fact that feds can borrow on the bond market for 30 years at less than 1%. So theoretically, it actually lowers their debt servicing costs, and that's quite remarkable in and of itself. But expect these deficit numbers to continue to climb. The markets didn't have any reaction whatsoever. That in and of itself was remarkable because all governments are in the same boat. Our dollar was actually up by the end of the day, and so was the TSX.
That is incredible. Obviously, at the beginning of all this, we saw the plummet, and yet they have bounced back. We've been talking about NASDAQ over the last few days and how successful it's been. Obviously, the tech companies, including Twitter, are doing well. Twitter's got something new in the works.
Well, this was an interesting story because they had a job posting that looked for a programmer who specializes in a subscriber model. So is Twitter perhaps looking at expanding its revenue base from simply advertisements? That would be a different business model for Twitter, and investors went, oh, that's a good idea. Will people be willing to pay for it is another question. But nevertheless, the shares of Twitter jumped 12% at its best level yesterday. I don't know. If you don't have to look at ads, maybe. I'm not entirely sure of the rationale. I guess maybe it can be more targeted, or they can use better algorithms or what have you.
Exactly. We've seen it with Facebook, obviously, and the other social media models. So
indeed.
Who's to say? We shall see. More layoffs yesterday, this time in the airline industry and via rail.
Yeah, well, United Airlines in the States is warning that it is, perhaps going to cut, and it's just laying in the groundwork right now. 36,000 jobs. The global airlines have a long way to go before they're back to anywhere to a full schedule. And United is reportedly burning through $40 million a day. That's how much it's losing. I mean, the numbers are staggering. And then you looked at what Via Rail was saying yesterday, temporary layoffs of 1,000 workers because the rail lines are running, but are people traveling? And pretty much not, or certainly not at the extent or to the extent that they were prior to the pandemic shutdown. People are hesitant.
Definitely not across borders, and we've talked this week as well about that middle seat on those flights. Nobody wants to sit in those rows.
You can try to sell it, but will people buy it?
Exactly. However, there are businesses that are doing well throughout all of this. Everybody needs to get to Costco to get all their goods, and they're doing quite well as a result.
Yeah, their sales are up, and they have been throughout this whole dilemma. The lineups outside to get into the store, they got the whole, it's turned into a bit of a maze pattern in a Costco store. Not that it wasn't before, I suppose, but even more so now. But people are bulking up on big box, items, I suppose, and the sales were up again in June by 11%. A big sales increase, and that's going to just lead to more profitability for Costco. We want to focus on trying to help small businesses, right? But in the wake of all of this, at the same time, the big box retailers have done fine by their own standards, and the share price is up a little bit this morning.
Perhaps it's not only the individual consumer, but it's the small businesses needing their goods and
to get there. That's exactly right. They do buy in bulk for their own supply chain, right? So it all kind of feeds into itself.
Thankfully, it's not toilet paper anymore. It's,
that seems to have been.
it's the sanitizing wipes that we all need and can't find.
Yeah, that's true.
All right, Mike, thank you for joining us this morning.
Thank you. Have a good one.